Hi, everybody. This is Gad Saad, feeling quite relieved that pretty much done with the Parasitic Mind. Make sure to pre-order your copy ASAP. It should be going to print some point next week. In any case, today I wanted to talk to you about an idea or something that was first exposed to 30 years ago in a advanced social psychology course. This was my first semester as a doctoral student at Cornell, and the professor, his name is Professor Regan, had assigned some readings on the types of suboptimal strategies that people use, sort of self-sabotaging strategies. And I remember the specific example that we had discussed in the course was the name dropping strategy, when people use name dropping without necessarily realizing that it can backfire, because most people find that strategy to be quite obnoxious. And so I've always wondered, incidentally, even prior to having taken that course, why is it that some people are blind to their clearly suboptimal, in this case, say, social strategies? And now, fast forward 30 years, last week, my wife and I watched series, a Australian series, where these four women, three of them are divorced, one of them is a widower. Uh, they're trying to find love, and so it's basically I think it's an 8 episode series, pretty silly, where you follow their quote journey. And at one point, the gentleman who is guiding them through that journey, a life coach, uh, who otherwise is actually quite astute in some of his observations, filmed the women as they were going on dates, and then replayed the tapes for them to see it. So in a sense, their behaviors are now in front of a mirror. They could see themselves. Uh, and of course, what was incredible is that he was showing them how their behaviors can come across when they can now see themselves in action. And so in one case, there was a woman who, was so overwhelming in how she would monopolize the conversation. Her date would have no chance to even utter a syllable, because she would just have zero empty space, empty points in the conversation, and she would just keep rambling, making it very difficult for the other person to even interject a syllable. And when she was shown her behavior, of course, she was horrified. You see how people respond when they're shown, their frailties, their behaviors that they engage in that are suboptimal. But maybe the more poignant example was a second woman who, positioned herself as, bubbly and smiley, and the life of the party, and she would always, have these hysterically loud laughter, which is very, very off-putting, and anyone within a 100-mile radius of her would probably have ruptured eardrums from her loud laughter, fake laughter, by the way. And the life coach in question pointed this to her, which is of course difficult to do, because you're sharing some negative feedback to someone, and they don't necessarily always take it well. But she saw herself uh, on the date, and it was so cringeworthy that she wasn't able to watch it. And then as they're kind of going through the thing, she starts to cry, because she realizes how she comes across. And so that got me to think about, what is it that makes people blind to their suboptimal strategies, whether that they interrupt people, whether they monopolize conversations, whether they don't engage in active listening, whether they engage in loud, obnoxious laughter. And incidentally, and I tweeted about this when it happened last week, my very young son came down to sit with us when my wife and I were watching, not knowing anything about what I'm telling you about now, and he sees the woman who engages in that hyena-like laughter, and being a mini Gad who cuts right through the BS and straight to the truth, says, well, what is going on? Why is she obnoxious like that? Why is she laughing in such a fake way? Of course, children have a wonderful ability to dispense the truth unencumbered by, you know, cognitive filters. And so again, it makes me think, well, what is it that this 8-year-old little boy can pick up, which this grown woman is unable to pick up? And so I actually went out today with a friend of mine for coffee, who he's a clinical psychologist. So in many cases, therapy is nothing more than a therapist putting up the proverbial mirror for you to look at your suboptimal behaviors. In other words, the exercise that the life coach was doing in that show, where he would replay the taped dates so that the women can see how they behave on these dates. Well, that's that's basically a form of having a mirror, right, to your suboptimal behaviors. And so, in many instances, I mean, some cases you go see a therapist because you're suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and in this case, okay, there'll have to be a pharmacological intervention to deal with the situation. In other cases, maybe you suffer from a dysfunctional fear of spiders, and then you might have to engage in exposure therapy, or in other cases, you might have to do cognitive behavior therapy. But in many cases, it's really about a third party, in this case, a therapist, simply holding up a mirror to your behaviors. And as I was telling my friend, the clinical psychologist with whom I went out to for coffee, I was asking him, what percentage of the cases where people come for therapy do you think fall under the rubric of the mirror, where it's not because you suffer from an organic problem, paranoid schizophrenia. It's not because of something that requires a scripted intervention, say like cognitive behavior therapy, but where really your main task is to put up a mirror in front of the client or patient so that they can see these suboptimal patterns that they otherwise are unable to see. And I said, well, of course, in couples therapy, I would think that number is quite high, because in couples therapy, it's not usually because you have an organic disease. It's precisely because you don't have good communication styles and so on. And so, we were talking about that, and we sort of agreed that it might be as high as a quarter of the cases where people are going to see a therapist is really about putting up the mirror for you to see your suboptimal behaviors. So I'm not sure if I have a sort of a life lesson here to offer, but I guess what might be good is to always be open to listening to people's feedback. It's difficult for people to offer us feedback. Our instinct is to be defensive, and so in most cases people avoid giving you feedback. And so you might go through your life unaware that you are actually engaging in behaviors that harm you in the sense that they make people dislike you more than they otherwise would. If you are interrupting people, if you don't listen to them, if you continuously name drop, if you have a laughing, hyena laughter that can make, dogs have bleeding ears from 100 miles away, maybe you shouldn't be doing these behaviors. So there are very small interventions, corrections that you could do that can improve the manner by which people view you. And yet we go through life oftentimes unwilling or unknowing about many of these frailties that we carry. So there you have it. I guess the point here is that whether you go see a therapist, or if you have a partner, or if you have a good friend that can that you could sufficiently trust to be able to offer you that feedback, it is a good person to have close by. In any case, hope you're having a good day. Wish you a great weekend, and don't forget, head off and pre-order The Parasitic Mind now. It really helps when the book comes out in terms of establishing the bestseller list. I'm counting on you. Cheers, everybody. Bye.